And welcome everybody to the Daily Space Weather. I'm your host, Dan, aka Smasher Mash, coming at you from the Smash News Network, least busted name in news. We've got new sunspots rising, no less than two groups in the eastern limb of the closest star, and lots more interesting information, as always, like the moving ionosphere, something we weren't expecting to cover, but hey, it's there. We'll cover it later in the video in our bonus feature segment. So yeah, two new sunspots rising here. One in the north and one in the south. A new heliospheric current sheet just arrived, the North Pole current sheet. Let's take a look at the western limb next, because we've got a huge number of setting sunspots here, so the likelihood of large solar flares still remains. We could still see an X-class flare from this group right here, but at the moment the X-ray profile has greatly dropped with those setting sunspots. Again, we could still see an X-class flare for the next day or so. And those rising groups are a lot less complex. Let's take a look at the last 24 hours in 94 angstroms, as there have been a number of M-class flares once again today. Again, at the end of this 24-hour video, you should see the overall brightness here dropping a little bit. And 94 angstroms is a portion of the ultraviolet light spectrum, the extreme ultraviolet light spectrum. It coincides with ionized iron. And let's take a look at a bunch of more information here. That's the last 24 hours. Next, we'll look at volcanoes to see what has been erupting lately. So Shiveluch continues to erupt. 20,000-foot ash plume over the Kamchatka Peninsula from Shiveluch, flight level 200. Flight level 060 over Sakurajima. Flight level 140 over Semeru. Flight level 220 over Popocatépetl in central Mexico. It's a 22,000-foot plume of volcanic ash. Fuego in Guatemala exploding. Flight level 150. Flight level 220 over Sangay in Ecuador. Flight level 140 over Revenador in the same nation. 14,000-foot ash plume as Revenador and Sangay both explode, and Saab and Kaya were unable to detect. Please do not pole vault the caldera. Please do leave us a comment, press like, press the share button, as our subscriber count stagnates for an extended period of time, probably because of pathetic censorship by big tech organizations like Twitter, Apple, Facebook, and let's don't forget Google. Today's featured product is the Galactic The Galactic Federation Special Forces Universum Liberate merch. You can find links below the video to the merch shop, so check the description for that. Universum Liberate. To quote Geddy Lee of Rush, if I could wave my magic wand, I'd set everybody free. So order some merch, support the Smash team that way, give Smash staff a raise. It's the official merch shop of the Smash News Network, least busted name in news. If you do click the link below the video, you will see the designs that we have offered up in order of best selling. So check that out. And here you go. Here's a quick little rundown of the best-selling merch items, in which there has been a recent change, as Do Not Pole Vault the Caldera has recently become our best seller, and congratulations on surviving a global scamdemic so far. Next, looking at the last 90 days here of seismic. Let me speak English. Looking at the last 90 days here of seismic activity. That's a convenient bar graph there by volcanodiscovery.com. And the largest quake of the past 24, well, there were actually two 5.4s. But interestingly enough, this one right by Midland, Texas there, a 5.4 magnitude quake likely felt in Lubbock, including parts of New Mexico there. A 5.4 magnitude quake in Texas. So let us know in the comments, definitely, if you felt that one, as I find that quite interesting. A quake of that magnitude in the Lone Star State. So let's scroll up the list here. There's only one other quake of that size. So it's been a very seismically calm day here. Not a lot of quakes, and certainly not a lot of large quakes. That 5.4 came in at 23:35 Universal Time yesterday evening. And of course, several aftershocks there from that 5.4. That 5.4 in Ecuador came through at 9:46 this morning. That's also Universal Time. And let's get back to space. So this is composite imagery. This is what we started out with. 171 plus 193 angstroms. We've got a North Pole-oriented coronal hole rotating here in the north and a South Pole-oriented coronal hole rotating here in the south. New sunspots in the east. Old sunspots setting in the west. We'll see a decline in the sunspot number, even though new sunspots have risen. Here is 171 angstroms. And once again, this is the last 24 hours. What the hell is going on? Having all kinds of issues. That is yesterday's imagery. I don't know why we're showing it. All right. The 10.7 centimeter radial flux is unknown, although last we checked it was 164 solar flux units. Space Weather Enthusiast dashboard not showing it. We'll be interested to see what the radial flux is. I think it's going to drop down to 152. So that's my guess. Again, lots of sunspots have set in the west. This is the one-year graph to put it in context. The black line is the radial flux. The red line is the sunspot number. And by the way, the recent sunspot number uptick is the highest we've seen in solar cycle 25. It slightly exceeded the numbers that we saw back here in May. So yeah, that recent conflagration of solar activity is the highest in terms of sunspot number that we've seen so far in solar cycle 25, which began, by the way, in November of 2019. Next, looking at the Space Weather Enthusiast dashboard, no space weather storms forecasted here. We are expecting some sort of a CME impact. It'll probably be rather minor on the 19th, probably something like midday on the 19th. So whether or not it causes a significant increase in the KP index, who knows? I'll say maybe we'll see a KP4 from it over a very brief period of time. It was a diffuse and rather stealthy CME or series of CMEs, but I would, again, put the target time somewhere around midday on December 19th. Continuing on to Earth's magnetic moment from space, we've got a very diffuse solar wind here at the moment, so we've got a very weak geospace magnetosphere movie to show you today indeed. There's a huge chunk of missing data, so some issues arising in the past 24 hours. And yeah, so very weak magnetosphere here at the moment in terms of the plasma pressure, the magnetohydrodynamic pressure around the Earth, and very geomagnetically calm conditions here. So this is the last 4 hours Earth's magnetic moment from the ground. The last was Earth's magnetic moment from space. And when we look at the KP index, we'll have a missing KP index for like 9 hours. That's more than 9 hours. That's more like, the heck? It's nearly an entire day of missing KP index. Anyway, the current KP index is at 0.67. So again, very geomagnetically calm conditions. Here you can see the missing data in the real-time solar wind there. No measurements showing up at all from Lagrange point 1 there for between about 2100 and about 0600 this morning. Current conditions are only 1.5 protons per cubic centimeter for the solar wind density. Solar wind speed only 321 kilometers per second. It's a very slow and very diffuse solar wind. There are your GOES magnetometers over the past 3 days. Nothing to write home about there. It's a normal operating range. And let's take a look at the heliospheric current sheet, since we've got a new polarity plasma regime here showing up at Earth of the North Pole variety. So Earth has just recently moved into the North Pole current sheet, shown here in green. No surprises to our regular viewers. Took a little longer than expected, probably because of some sunspots showing up in the east. So here's our line of sight field plot. Solar polar fields in green for north, red for south. Solar B field in blue. That's the field that goes through the magnet, which brings us to Coronal holes. What evil lurks in the depths of coronal holes? I don't think any evil lurks in them at all, but certainly high-speed solar winds come from them. There you can see those North Pole-oriented coronal holes rotating in there in the east. So these, yes indeed, these coronal holes in the north, they are North Pole-oriented. These coronal holes in the south are South Pole-oriented, an indication that Solar Cycle 25's field reversal process is still yet to happen. So for all of those folks out there who think that we are already past solar maximum, think again. The solar polar field reversal process is probably more important than the sunspot number, and the solar polar field reversal process is taking its good old time because check it out. North Pole, South Pole, they have to reverse before we are past the solar maximum. We don't see them reversed, we see them in the normal orientation. Next, we'll move to sunspots to cite some more facts. And no, it's not a grand solar minimum. Because if it were, there would be like 0 sunspots as opposed to hundreds of sunspots. So yeah, we expect the number to drop further today, even though some new groups have risen. They'll be known as 3169 and 3170. Let's take a look at some imagery from SDO. This is the magnetogram plus 335 angstroms. To add a little bit of liveliness to it, let's zoom in a little closer here. Most sunspot groups have been stable here over the past 24 hours. And let's switch to the SDO continuum imagery. There you go. And here's the continuum by itself without the 335 angstroms. Both of those new sunspot groups appear to be alpha class sunspots as far as I can tell, so we'll be looking at that in great detail at the end of the video. Proton flux remains flatlined here, no relativistic particles once again. And you can see this reduction here in the X-ray profile. So if we bring up the 7-day X-ray flux graph, you can see we had this huge conflagration, those sunspots in the southwestern hemisphere especially. So a few M-class flares there, but it's been simmering down a lot here. Don't forget, folks, we still could see the possibility of an X-class flare. The most likely place, in my opinion, is still this southwestern limb. There's still a day or so when that sunspot could produce a flare in the X-class range. So that's 131 angstroms. Let's look at some additional imagery here. There we've added 335. Good stuff. And here we'll take a brief look in these wavelengths at the eastern limb. And how about a zoom out to the full disk view in those wavelengths? And let's move on to a star chart. So, of course, we're always interested in what's going on overhead. There's a crescent moon up there high in the sky at the moment as we approach new moon. The moon does indeed behave like a timepiece. If you know where you are, you can tell what time it is and what date it likely is based on the phase of the moon and the location in the sky, of course. So as sunrise just occurs here, the sun just peeking over the horizon at the moment, that's what's going on over Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania. If you want to make your own star chart, head to in-the-sky.org. Pick the All Sky Chart 2, I believe it's called. All Sky Chart. That's the one we use, and let's do a solar system forecast. So as we approach new moon, we are, I believe, 6 days from a new moon here. Let's advance this 1 week. As Earth advances around to the lonely side of the solar system, the side of the solar system with no gas giants. That's where things will be on Christmas Eve. We will have a crescent waxing moon, barely a sliver of a moon. It'll be a dark night for Santa. So next we're going to look at some coronagraphs. Here is the 24-hour video. And what's interesting here is we've actually got a great comet here showing up. Fantastic comet right in here, looking like it's breaking up. And let's take a look at George Mason University. This is yesterday. Some CMEs happening there. We'll take a look at whether they're earthly directed here in a moment. And here's today's imagery. As that comet makes its way behind the coronagraph obscurement disk, it looks like it is disintegrating at that moment. We'll also take a look at Lagrange 5, where stereo A is located, and the raw data from SOHO LASCO C3 at Lagrange 1. So I don't see any indication of Earth-directed coronal mass ejections here. For you new viewers, Earth would be off. And by the way, congratulations on realizing the channel exists if you're a new viewer. The Earth would be off in this direction from stereo A. And so as you can see in the stereo A imagery, no earthly directed coronal mass ejections, besides the one that we talked about a couple of days ago. So again, we are expecting a minor impact on the 19th. Here's some more imagery of that comet. And there it is in the full zoom out. That's the last 24 hours. LASCO C2, C3, and the SDO 304 angstroms wavelength. And next we'll talk about filaments. Thanks to everybody who's been involved in naming filaments. Thanks to Brett, we've named the Greta Thunberg filament, which has now left the building, at least left the sun. And yeah, join us on Twitter for Name That Filament. We've got some filaments down here in the southeast. I don't know how many there, maybe 4. So if you'd like to name that filament, join us on Twitter. Let's copy that image and do a tweet. Once again, name that filament. Feel free to mark up the image. There it is. Posted straight to the Twitter. So join us over there. We have a pathetic number of followers. Check it out, 337 followers on Twitter and 18,000 tweets. We've been on there since 2019. The shadow bans continue. The pathetic censorship by organizations like Google, Facebook, Apple, and Twitter continue. If you think the internet is fixed, if you think free speech and censorship are gone, if you think free speech is restored and censorship is gone, you are living in a fantasy. Deboosting has not ended on Twitter. It absolutely continues. And if you think it's ended, you are deluded. This is the last about 2.5 hours and 304 angstroms from the GOES 16 SUVI. And it looks like some activity indeed is happening in this new sunspot here. 3169 will be the name of that group. And let's take a look at the last 24 hours here in SDO. This is SDO 193 plus 171. And I wanted to look at 304 angstroms here. I'm pretty sure I've got it. There we go. Let's bring that up. There you go. That's the last 24 hours in SDO 304 angstroms, which is ionized helium. And that brings us to our bonus features segment. The first thing we'll look at with bonus features is satellite charging hazards. And at the moment, we ain't got none. It's clear sailing for satellites there, as we see green all around the world. No charging hazards. The GOES electron flux here, kind of low, kind of surprisingly low, following a rather high-speed coronal hole wind stream. So interestingly enough, low electron flux here. And the forecast model here expecting low electron flux again. Not sure on that one. Maybe there's another coronal hole wind stream headed this way, but we are, again, expecting a CME impact, a minor one, midday universal time on the 19th. Here's the one-year graph to put the relativistic electrons in context. Again, as we see low levels of electron flux, we're seeing quite anomalous ionosphere data indeed. So the F layer of the ionosphere, located here at 300 kilometers of altitude, is showing us indications that the South Atlantic anomaly has left the South American continent and is now someplace over here in the Pacific Ocean. So you'll see this area of inflection here where you see big striations in the ionosphere. That looks exactly like the South Atlantic anomaly, only it's no longer over the South American continent. South Atlantic anomaly used to be where that X is, and now it seems to be where that arrow is in the South Pacific. So that's moving several hundred miles there in a few days. Not exactly sure the reasoning on that one. I don't hear anybody else reporting it. So whatever, we just cite facts on the channel, and whether anybody else tunes in or not is a function of how pathetic the censorship is on the internet. Anyway, here's the latest image, and here's the anomalygram. We'll go back to the latest image here in a minute. But on the anomalygram, it'll be even more obvious that the South Atlantic anomaly is now here instead of over the South American continent. It's right in this area. Also, the South African anomaly seems to have moved north a little bit. So some major changes happening there in the ionosphere. And what the implications of that are anybody's guess. Anyway, there's the latest image. That's 12:15 Universal Time. There's the anomalygram. There is the ionogram. Once again, right here, you can see that weak spot in the ionosphere. The South Atlantic anomaly is now the South Pacific anomaly. Next, looking at the electron content. That is the free electrons from your GPS satellite down to your handset. Free electrons can cause signal refraction. And signal refraction causes GPS errors. So there's your total electron content map. Here's the animated version from the Space Weather Prediction Center. And we're seeing continuing huge GPS errors likely over in North America. Also the southern polar region. So seeing lots of electrons here out of place. We expected it to get a little bit more organized and a little bit higher levels of electron flux. Those forecasts have been revised. So we've got quite chaotic total electron content forecast here. We'll let that play through one more time so you can see the huge errors that have been occurring. Lots of free electrons remain out of place here. So some major issues happening here with respect to space weather. And whether you know about it or not, well, congratulations. You must be watching the video. Congratulations on realizing that the channel exists. So once again, here's our latest imagery from SDO. And let's look at these new sunspot groups real quick. So there is 3170, I believe, will be the name of that group. It looks like it's only alpha class here at the moment. I don't see any additional umbrae yet. This group up here, alpha class. I see only North Pole umbrae there. So 2 alpha class sunspot groups. They'll prevent the sunspot number from going super low. As we got a bunch of groups setting, we'll have to see if there are additional umbrae there. But at the moment, those are just alpha class sunspot groups. And while we do see some activity up here, the likelihood of them producing major flares isn't that high. The likelihood of this group down here producing major flares remains still kind of high. So continuing on, if you haven't seen the Hemp Lucid products, check the description below the video. You can find a link down there, Shop by Solution. Fantastic products. We'll have to do another product review. Check our product reviews playlist at youtube.com/smashamash/playlists for a product review of some of those products. There's even CBD for your pets. So check it out and let's move to the realm of meteorology. Over a decade ago, I realized that it's way too easy to forecast Earth's weather, and I knew that I would need to seek additional challenges. Here at the Smash News Network, least busted name in news, we like challenges, and we like citing facts. So here's some facts. The North Atlantic is full of big waves at the moment. There are some 26-footers up there and some 26-footers down there, as there's a huge low-pressure system there, northwest of the Azores. And, by the way, the Azores are also on my bucket list. Let's check the biggest waves in the world. Where are they? They may be those, indeed. They may be those waves in the North Atlantic. I think they are. It's a bad day to be on a boat with Mark Wahlberg and George Clooney. It could be the perfect storm. Oh, my God. Also a swirling low there in between Nova Scotia and Cape Cod. All right, let's switch to the surface winds here and go to our regularly scheduled meteorology segment. So there are the surface winds of the east. Got a strong low pressure system down here in the southern Indian Ocean. Here are the jet streams of the east. Huge bends in the jet stream there around the outer Aleutians and the Kamchatka Peninsula. Some jet stream blowing nearly backwards there. Next, jet streams of the west are looking like this. Pretty chaotic jet stream there over the Pacific at the moment. And if you think Earth's magnetic field is affecting water vapor, well, fun fact, water is not magnetic. So don't be an idiot. Water is not magnetic. Here are oh man, look at the jet streams over the U.S. too. Lots of cold air from western Canada blasting its way down all the way to Texas. Here are the surface winds of the west. See those two powerful lows in the Atlantic Ocean. And here are the surface winds of the central world. Shout out to our viewers from the Middle East, Africa, and Europe. Congratulations to you on realizing that the planet that the planet exists, that the channel exists. There are the jet streams for the central world, and let's move on as there's plenty of other stuff to cover. This is clouds and fog over the Americas. We like it when NASA projects the croissant-shaped Earth onto a spherical Adobe Photoshop template. It's hilarious that people are convinced that the Earth is shaped like a sphere as opposed to a croissant. We will continue laughing and laughing about it, but there is what's going on in terms of clouds and fog over the Western world. Welcome to Croissant Earth. Next, our weather.gov map. If your county's lit, click your county. We can't go over all of those. Those are too many counties, but those are winter weather warnings, winter storm warnings for much of New England. Also gale warnings up and down the East Coast. Again, if your county's lit, click your county. We scroll down just to show the key. Freeze warnings. It looks like they're around the Gulf Coast, as that cold air from Canada making it all the way down to Texas and beyond. Next, we're going to show the snow forecast here. It was not available when we did show prep, so here's a 72-hour GFS accumulated positive snow depth change in inches. Beware, there's an annoying pop-up coming. I don't want to save the GIF. All right, it never came, so we'll take it. That is your GFS 72-hour accumulated positive snow depth change in inches. Heaviest snows forecasted there for Maine, but also some rather significant snow coming to Washington, Idaho, Montana, and more. Here's your 72-hour GFS pressure and precipitation forecast. Some severe weather expected around the Gulf Coast. Nolan's about to get hit in about 3 days. Again, that's your GFS 72-hour pressure and precipitation forecast. And here is your snow forecast based on the European model. Let's zoom in a little bit on the northern portion of the country. Now, let's leave it there. All right, we'll leave it there. Here's your 3-day Euro forecast. This is where we expect things to be on Tuesday at 1 p.m. So there you go. Some additional snows coming over the weekend. Next, your NASA GOES lightning mapper, and there was indeed some severe lightning there around the Florida Keys. Some drunk people at Key West probably getting a light show in the last 12 hours. Next, because there's a lot of drunk people at Key West. Next, are there any terrestrial strikes? Looks like there's a light show going on to your south, Miami. Shout out to our viewers from Miami. If you're on a tall building, go take some imagery. Take some videos of those cloud tops. You may see some sprites, green elves, and pink squids. Those are not Lucky Charms. Those are space weather / Earth weather convergence. Anyway, that's your real-time lightning map from lightningmaps.org. And it looks like it's more bound up than somebody on a cheese-only diet. I don't know what's going on. Let's continue on to our U.S. Doppler radar map. We'll focus on the lower 48. And as you can see that low there, it looks like it's now centered over Wisconsin. It'll be more evident on the cloud map and the water vapor map, so let's switch to those next. There is clouds and fog, and that low pressure is right over the center of Wisconsin here at the moment. There is your water vapor map, and you can see all things rotating. Actually, I think the low is over the upper peninsula here. So somewhere in between Lake Michigan and Lake Superior, I believe, is where that low is now located. It's taken its good old time moving to the northeast. Here's your recap in the form of U.S. Doppler radar, which shows vertical motion of water droplets on ground-based Doppler radar systems. Here is clouds and fog, 3.9 nanometer infrared radiation from the satellite flying over Croissant Earth. And here is water vapor. Not a lot of dry air over the U.S. here at the moment. You can see a lot of cold air there descending down into places like Oklahoma. And that is where we'll close things out. Thanks for tuning into the Smash News Network, least busted name in news. I've been your host, Dan, a.k.a. Smash-O-Mash, signing off. And may that solar wind be at your back. Facts stated in this video are not necessarily facts that have not been suppressed by Big Tech.